Well, thank you everyone who is here with us today. My name is Risa Shimoda. I'm the Executive Director of the River Management Society. And you have arrived, hopefully this is what you're interested in, Wild and Scenic River Water Quality, a new resource for river managers. So we're really pleased and honored to have a panel of experts, Wild and Scenic Rivers experts with us today. And Jennifer Back, who's worked for the Park Service on the Interagency Wild and Scenic Rivers Coordinating Council, as does Roy Smith, who works in the BLM as the water quality. We'll do more introductions later. BLM Colorado, and Mike Eberly with the Forest Service. So thank you guys for being here, and thanks for all who are in attendance. I'm going to hand it over to Angie, the River Training Center Coordinator.
Hi, everyone. Angie Braley here, and thank you, as Risa mentioned, for joining us today to learn a little bit more about the water quality paper. This is one of our river management roundtables, and these take place monthly. We have a discussion on the second Tuesday, and really everyone's welcome. So we have different types of topics, and we're always, trying to get folks together to discuss some solutions that might be impacting rivers in more than one location. So thank you for joining us for the roundtable. And then just a few notes here. We are recording this and we will be posting this onto our YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the chat here in a second. And we'll be sending it out to everyone who registered. We love to see you, but please stay muted while we're discussing things. However, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And so at that time, you'll be able to come off mute and raise your hand, and then we'll call on you and you can come off mute and ask a question. You're also welcome to put any questions that you have into the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that and monitoring that. And then just a few, ground rules around sharing space and making sure that we listen and stay respectful. So thank you again for joining us today. And now I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves. We'll just go ahead and start with Jennifer and then go to Roy and then Mike. So.
Great. So this is Jennifer. I'm not showing up there, Angie. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Jennifer Back, and I was with the National Park Service. I'm now retired, but I had continued to work with the Interagency Wild and Scenic River Coordinating Council after I retired, in part to try to get this paper finished. So thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Roy Smith. As Risa mentioned, I work for BLM Colorado. I'm the program lead for our Wild and Scenic Rivers program for water rights and in-stream flow protection. And I also do in-stream flow protection and water rights work for BLM Utah.
And hi, everyone. My name is Mike Eberly. I've worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and I've been with the Forest Service now for almost 14 years. And my main roles have been watershed health or watershed restoration, as well as currently my main focus is water rights and uses that support the National Forest System's lands. So great to be here today. Thank you.
Okay, with that, unless Risa or Angie have anything else, we'll just start off with our presentation.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Well, the first thing I want to address is some of you may be wondering, who is the Interagency Wild and Scenic Rivers Coordinating Council? And a summary of that is that we're an interagency working group. We're comprised of 3 representatives from each of the land management agencies that manages wild and scenic rivers. So the U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, and Fish and Wildlife Service. I am one of 3 representatives from the BLM. Mike is one of 3 representatives from the Forest Service. And we meet monthly online and annually in person. And our overall goal is to facilitate consistent implementation of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act across the country. And The reason that that's a challenge is we have a huge range of rivers that have been designated as wild and scenic, all the way from rivers that are in wilderness areas in Alaska to urban rivers that flow through Sacramento or might flow through a small village in New England. We have a huge range of proposed projects that are occur on designated rivers, from boat docks to hydroelectric projects, power lines, etc., that we need to respond consistently to. And each of our management agencies, each of the four, have different management objectives, procedures, and policies. So our working group does not set policy, but we help coordinate between the four agencies so that we do have more or less consistent policy. And the ways that we accomplish that implementation consistency are through three major things. One is through training. We have agreements with the River Management Society, which is bringing you this presentation for training. We also have an agreement with the Epley Center for Parks and Public Lands at Indiana University. Another way that we achieve consistency is through maintenance of a website called rivers.gov. And that website contains information and a contact and a landing place for the public. It includes maps of designated rivers, background on the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, explains how rivers are designated, and it lists river management plans that are currently under development. And then the final thing we do is we provide technical support and for our river managers. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike now, who will talk a little bit more about some of the technical support and products that the council offers to river managers.
There we go. Thank you. Just making sure the slides were caught up. So hi again, everyone. As Roy pointed out, we are part of the Interagency Wild and Scenic River Coordinating Council. The information that's available on the rivers.gov webpage, I want to emphasize that it's not just for wild and scenic river managers. This information is applicable to, I would say most of the information is very applicable to any river managers out there, whether it's a designated river or not. So it's a fantastic kind of set of resources. So if you go to rivers.gov, across the top of the paper, you'll see one of the tabs is river resources, and under that you'll see these different subcategories of training, technical papers, project reviews, GIS resources, and the Q&A. I just wanted to, did I do that right? I tried to put into the chat a link just to the river resources. Let's see. There we go. Now it's in there. And this information is, I mean, the information available here is it's really, I mean, it spans a whole range of questions, from water rights for quantifying in-stream flows, how to do that, how to build a group of partners for water quality considerations, which is going to be a focus of this paper that we're talking about today. And also, as Roy says, really references a number of the trainings that are available through the river management societies. There's a link to even the training videos. So I would suggest going there, even if you're not a wild and scenic river manager. If you just want some information, it's a great one-stop shop. And with that, I'll hand it to Jennifer.
Great, thanks, Mike. So why are we here? What led to the development of this particular technical paper from the council? And really there were a few different reasons, but one of the main ones was that in around 2017, 2018, we were looking at the 50th anniversary of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and wanting to celebrate our successes that, you know, over the last 50 years, but also wanting to perhaps look at some of the challenges that we might still face. And so we recognize that the 50th anniversary represented an opportunity to look at some of the things that that we were supposed to be doing for wild and scenic rivers, and try to assess how well we were doing. And so one of those things was water quality. And the National Park Service took it upon themselves to do a study, an evaluation of water quality for the National Wild and Scenic River System. So for all of the rivers in the system, not just those rivers that were managed by the Park Service. And what we found was that there were some challenges facing water quality on wild and scenic rivers, and these are very similar to other rivers that are outside of the system. But the surprising thing was that not all wild and scenic rivers were actually being assessed for water quality. And then those rivers that were being assessed mostly through state agencies and reported through state agencies, 70% of those rivers were considered impaired under state programs. And so that was kind of startling and a little bit discouraging, I think, for us to realize that, there were this many rivers that were facing these water quality challenges. So we recognized that we needed to raise awareness about our responsibilities for water quality, and we needed to provide some guidance. And there had already been one paper, a technical paper that is on the rivers.gov website, but that paper was a paper that included both water quality and water quantity. It wasn't focused on water quality itself, and it had been written, published finally in 2003, so written before 2003. And so there were a number of things that had changed since then that we thought were relevant, not just to water quality, but to in-stream flow protection. And so we decided that it would be really helpful if we separated that 2003 technical paper into two separate papers, one that focused on water quality and one that focused on water quantity, or what we call in-stream flow protection. And so we did come up with a work plan to work on those two different guidance documents. The water quantity paper, that is the in-stream flow protection paper, came out a couple years ago, and now we're finally happy to say that this 2024 water quality paper is ready for public viewing. So we now have that 2003 technical paper divided into two separate papers. Hopefully that can be helpful to river managers. So with that, we were hoping that with these new papers that we would be able to provide new tools for river managers. So, next slide. So what was the purpose of this paper? What is the purpose of this paper? It is mainly to raise awareness, help river managers understand their responsibilities under the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, but also to give them some tools and strategies that they can use to meet those responsibilities. In addition, the thought was that oftentimes the people that are river managers are not the same people, at least for federal agencies that are doing water quality work. And so we wanted to provide a document that was available to both parties so that they could talk to each other and work together and understand the responsibilities. The target audience of this paper is not just federal employees or federal staff, but also the other state and local partnership river, all of those people and organizations that are working on wild and scenic rivers. So not just federal agencies, but a range of different agencies that might have some responsibility for water quality on wild and scenic rivers. And the key points of the paper are basically that river managers need to be actively engaged in water quality protection programs. And oftentimes those programs are administered or managed by state agencies. So there's really this very strong need to work closely with state and often local and city, other kinds of agencies, but engagement is the key point there. In addition, water quality issues often are caused or happen because of land activities or activities that are happening outside of the river corridor, that is beyond what a river manager might have their focus on. And so there's this need to look outside of the river corridor. And finally, having a water quality monitoring program in place, and as part noted as part of the CRMP, the River Management Plan, is really helpful. So we'll talk a little bit about those particular points as we go through the rest of this discussion. So next slide. Yeah, so there's really two main laws that guide or direct water quality protection for wild and scenic rivers. Obviously, the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act identifies water quality as one of the fundamental purposes of designation. And then the second law or act that directs water quality is the Clean Water Act. And most folks are probably familiar with that. But the Clean Water Act itself is very complex. And of course, a full comprehensive explanation of the Clean Water Act was beyond the scope of this paper, but we did want to identify those parts of the act that might be particularly relevant to wild and scenic river managers. And some of those things include how water quality standards are developed, also both point and non-point source pollution programs, and also anti-degradation laws or standards that a state might regulate. So those were three sort of key areas where river managers have an opportunity to engage with states and to work with states on water quality protection. And so we wanted to pull out those things from the Clean Water Act that were particularly relevant. Also, we wanted to make sure that it was clear that the states really do have the responsibility for water quality protection. Oftentimes, the individuals at the state may not be aware of the special provisions within a wild and scenic river for a wild and scenic river that's been designated. So, for example, each river has different ORVs or outstandingly remarkable values that must be protected, and many of those require certain water quality criteria or standards to support those values. So just having water quality folks from the state talking to wild and scenic river managers is really important, so that there is the shared understanding of the roles and responsibilities. Next slide, please. Along with all of this idea of sharing responsibilities is the need for actually a monitoring program. And so, as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes the river manager is not necessarily the same person or group that is doing water quality monitoring for a particular river. And so we wanted to make sure it was clear that there are certain key provisions and elements of a monitoring program that, regardless of who is doing the monitoring, there's this understanding that these are important elements to include, and that a river manager should really be have in their own mind what these elements might be. One of the first key elements, of course, is the baseline condition. And establishing baseline condition for a wild and scenic river is something that all managers are required to must do, not just for water quality issues, but for other kinds of activities that are happening on a river. So, for example, under Section 7 of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, it's really helpful to know what your baseline condition is when you're evaluating these other projects that might be happening. So establishing baseline condition. Other key elements of a monitoring plan are identifying what the purpose of monitoring is. So it's important to understand that just having a monitoring program where you're going out and collecting samples isn't enough. You need to have your monitoring program tailored to a particular purpose. And so making sure that whatever water quality monitoring is being done meets that particular purpose that you're trying to achieve is really important. And along with that are the particular parameters that might be included in a monitoring program. This paper identifies what we would call core water quality parameters, and then also includes a list of supplemental parameters that might be appropriate depending on the kinds of activities or issues that a particular river or watershed might be encountering. Determining sampling frequency and duration needed. Again, these are the kinds of things that a river manager should be thinking about to make sure that the information that's being collected is scientifically robust and meets certain standards in terms of being able to say with any kind of assurance of whether your data is good and whether it proves or demonstrates a particular trend or a particular issue. The other thing about this is that it's really important to link your monitoring program to management actions. And so again, you want to make sure that what you're monitoring for is helpful to management, that it can help you prioritize different kinds of activities that you might want to undertake as a river manager, and it can help also be more cost effective. That is identifying areas where there may be opportunities to share information with other parties and share the responsibilities for water quality monitoring. So anyway, all of these kinds of things are part of what goes into developing a monitoring program, and this paper touches on those various things that a river manager might want to consider in terms of water quality monitoring. Next slide, please. So, of course, as I said, we knew that there were some challenges, some water quality challenges that we were facing, and that 2018 assessment of water quality really focused us on some of those issues. But there were a range of issues, and the rivers that we see in our system are diverse. They're all over the country. They come from urban and rural areas, and there's various values that those rivers have been set aside to protect. And so there's a number of different water quality challenges that river managers are facing. The top issues that we encountered in that 2018 paper included PCBs, mercury, heavy metals, temperature, of course, was a big one, and also sediment, which is actually not so surprising, perhaps. But so there were a number of different activities that were contributing to water quality issues in wild and scenic rivers, and many of those activities come, of course, from outside the wild and scenic river corridor. Also, what we found was that water quality issues are often a result of activities that have occurred many years, if not decades, or even longer in the past. So our rivers are still absorbing and responding to activities that occurred many years ago. And so we see that reflected in the water quality of wild and scenic rivers. And also one of the things that we see more and more are flow alterations and diversions and how that affects water quality. And so certainly reservoir operations and that kind of thing can affect water quality, but also in terms of flooding and climate change, those kinds of things that cause flow alterations or extreme events can also affect water quality. So there's a number of management challenges that wild and scenic river managers face, and the paper does touch on those. certainly doesn't go into a huge amount of detail, but it does touch on those various practices that may have some effect on water quality. Next slide, please. So the main point of the paper was really to provide some tools and strategies for river managers to help them deal with some of the issues that they might be facing. And one of the best ways of dealing with water quality on our rivers is what we call this watershed-wide approach. And this approach is really about multiple stakeholders, multiple groups being involved. It means identifying potential threats that are in a watershed and having your monitoring tailored to those particular threats and prioritizing actions associated with those particular threats. So really looking at the watershed as a whole, working with other local, state, and volunteer groups to address the kinds of monitoring that might be needed to track any kinds of changes that might be occurring. And then also incorporating this kind of approach and this monitoring into the river management plan. So again, the point is that, you know, just knowing that there's monitoring going on in your watershed doesn't ensure that that monitoring is going to continue into the future. It doesn't ensure that that monitoring is really of the nature that is needed for your particular issue. So incorporating some sort of water quality monitoring program or need into your management plan is really helpful. It makes sure that managers are aware of this need and helps, again, prioritize actions and activities that might be necessary to ensure that those that the information is being collected that is needed for management. Finally, strengthening state authorized tribe and local coordination, creating new partnerships. This is all part of what we would call a management strategy for wild and scenic rivers, and a way that we can help address some of the issues that we're seeing on these rivers. Next slide, please. So the paper does have an appendix, a fairly lengthy appendix, but really it shows 3 different case studies. Each case study comes from one of the 4 federal agencies. There's a case study from Alaska on a wild and scenic river that has some water quality issues associated with placer mining. There's another wild and scenic river from the southeast that has demonstrates some of the ways that both federal, state, and local groups came together to address some recreational challenges, that is, challenges that we were seeing from recreation itself on the river, and how those were addressed with the coordination of these various groups. And then this particular case study that I'm highlighting here, which was on the Virgin Wild and Scenic River in Zion National Park. And this particular issue had to do with a harmful algal bloom on the river. And it was initially found because of a dog that was playing in the river, and ultimately was exposed to some neurotoxins and actually died from that. But what this did was it raised awareness within the park and within the state of Utah of some of the issues that were before then not really, we weren't really well aware of. That is, this idea of benthic harmful algal blooms was not something that either the state or the park had a lot of awareness of. And so together the state and the park continue to work on monitoring information, data that's being collected on these rivers, and communicating this information to recreational users to ensure that they're safe when they're out there recreating. So there's been a really very important partnership that's been developed between the state and the park and the BLM, who manages now some sections outside of the park, some sections of the Wild and Scenic River. So again, there's a lot of coordination that has to go on to keep people safe, basically, with these kinds of issues. And so that was something that was a real challenge when the park first had to deal with it. And even just coming up with ways to sample this kind of algal bloom was a challenge at first. So there's some interesting information in each of these case studies that may be relevant to other river managers. I certainly think that algal blooms are something we'll see more and more of in various rivers as we are dealing with low flows and climate change and temperature issues into the future. So that's just one of the 3 case studies that are in this paper. Next slide. So there are a few overarching principles in this paper that we wanted to point out. Again, this idea of the watershed approach that involves multiple stakeholders, we think that's kind of key in addressing water quality. Again, not just for wild and scenic rivers, really, but for any river, having this bigger picture look is really important. Also, water quality protection and enhancement is required by statute and requires active engagement with states and, in many cases, authorized tribes. That is, there are some tribes out there that have responsibility for water quality. So working with the appropriate agency and developing a relationship with the appropriate regulating agency is really important for river managers. Third, this idea of creating a long-term water quality monitoring plan is essential and ideally is part of the comprehensive river management plan for a particular river. And then finally, this idea of participating in watershed-based water quality networks. You know, it is very cost effective and much more efficient to have folks working together to collect water quality information and deal with that information. And so that also is a key point of this paper. And next slide, please. So I went through that very quickly. Are there any questions that folks might have for us?
Hey, Jen?
Oh, sure.
Before we go to questions, I do want to put in a particular plug for the case study in the paper from Birch Creek, managed by BLM in Alaska, because we just had a big breakthrough on that creek since the paper was published this last spring, which is the BLM Alaska has been working with their counterpart agency with the state of Alaska, who manages water quality, very closely for over 30 years to improve water quality on Birch Creek. And just recently, the state of Alaska formally moved it from Category 2, which was an impaired stream, and it had to have a total maximum daily load set for it, to Category 4, which is attainment. And that was a 30-year-long process, involved lots of partnership with state agencies, and it just had to do with advances in stream reclamation methods, more strident regulations, increased mining inspections, and just, ongoing recovery of reclaimed areas. And so 30 years it took, but we finally crossed the finish line this last month. So congrats to BLM Alaska and the state of Alaska.
That's great, Roy. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So I did see a question come into the chat, and Jen, it was back when you were kind of talking about the setup for doing this paper, and I believe water quality data is what you were talking about, and Snake River Fund, correct me if I'm interpreting this wrong, but they asked, is the data from those tests publicly available?
So the paper, water quality data has to be reported, well, water quality information has to be reported by states to the EPA every couple of years. So each state is on a slightly different schedule or calendar, but water quality information is required to be reported by the Clean Water Act. And again, states have different ways of meeting those requirements. And all of the information that states have available is supposed to be uploaded to the water quality portal. So there is a database that's administered by the EPA where water quality is uploaded, and that's ideally where folks would go to find that kind of information. But that doesn't mean that all information is there. And so I think that is one of the challenges, is trying to encourage the different kinds of groups that are collecting water quality information to upload their information into this national database, which is available to everyone. It's available to federal, state, local groups, so long as the water quality data meets certain or has some kind of quality assurance associated with it, it can be uploaded. And so that's really important. But the caveat there is that, you know, it's up to individual agencies and groups to put their water quality information into this national database. So that would be the main place to look for water quality information. There's some links, I think, in the paper that have those water quality databases identified. So I'm not sure if that addresses the question or not.
They said thank you, so I think so.
Okay.
As you saw, might have seen, I put into the chat, like, you're welcome to ask any questions that you all have in the chat, or you can raise your hand and then come off mute, and we can answer them that way as well.
Hi there, it's Liz Lacey. I'm wondering if you, in developing this paper, if anything surprised you, if you saw a lot of successes, if there were a lot of things that weren't happening. Is there anything that you just got an impression of system-wide in developing this paper?
Okay, I guess I'll answer that. Hi, Liz. It's great to hear your voice. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just honestly, what strikes me the most is just I'm so happy it's out there now. It took a while to get here. I'm not sure that I really was surprised by anything that much. I think some of these ideas that are in this paper are things that we kind of knew already. That is, they're not really that different from other ways we would try to protect water quality on a particular river, whether it was designated or not. So I guess that you know, there weren't any surprises there. I will say that a lot of people put a lot of time into this paper, not just, again, the council itself, but we had a lot of reviewers and a lot of other folks looking at this paper from the EPA, from state agencies. We went through a lot of different iterations of the paper. And really, I think that it's a reflection of all of those different viewpoints from different people. But I don't know, Mike or Roy, if you have anything to add to that.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, Liz, I have one thing to add, which is, you know, I work in the water rights world, which takes forever for things to be decided most of the time. And I was really struck at how long-term and incremental working on water quality issues is over time. I mean, the example from BLM Alaska is just perfect. It took 30 years to solve that problem. So basically you just have to, you know, reach out, find out your partners and the people you're working with, and it's just a slow, steady application of effort over time. It's very unusual to solve a water quality problem, you know, really, really quickly unless you're stopping some really noxious point source discharge that's fouling your river. Most of it's non-point, most of it's widely distributed. It just takes a long time to implement solutions and see their effects.
So I did see another question coming in, and Bud was giving us some background on some of the plastic pollution and microplastics, and asked if there's any protocols for monitoring microplastics and nanoplastics in water that you propose.
Okay, yeah, so obviously that, you know, we heard more and more about microplastics and nanoplastics over the last several years. Again, this paper is not, you know, we're not really describing particular standards or particular methods for analysis. What we're trying to do is you know, have a guidance document for all wild and scenic rivers. That is where the information in this paper is relevant to all wild and scenic rivers, and it just identifies the basic core parameters that might be considered on a wild and scenic river, and then you know, some of the additional kinds of parameters that a particular river manager might consider depending on the land uses in the watershed. So for example, if you're in a rural area and there's a lot of agricultural uses, perhaps you want to include nitrate, nitrogen in your monitoring. But for things like microplastics, for some of the other kinds of issues that are out there where there may not be an EPA approved or state approved standard, you know, we certainly don't we don't try to establish a standard like that. We don't have the authority to do that. So really, all of the standards that that a wild and scenic river manager might be interested in or be using to determine the quality of their water, those are based on state standards, that is state agency established standards, and the EPA has to approve those. So all water quality standards go through that a sort of process where, you know, states have to develop those and the EPA has to approve them. Certainly a river manager could try to work with a state to establish a standard if they wanted to do that. But again, we are, the federal agencies at least do not set the standards. Again, not sure if I completely addressed that question. So happy to follow up.
And then there was another question that Bud asked about, does anyone do forensic testing, monitoring not associated with source water?
Not sure exactly what the question is dealing with, if we're talking about DNA or that kind of thing. I guess need a little more information.
Thanks, Jen. And then this next question, it's like could be answered really by anyone here. That's what these roundtables are for. But Foodshed Alliance asks, could someone share any evidence-based research that is related to concentrations of PFAS in rivers where plastic turf fields have been placed uphill from rivers? So just throwing that out there. If anyone has an answer, you're welcome to share that in the chat as well.
I have a question, Angie, for our panel.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is really part of the research or part of the work of putting the paper together, Jen, but I wondered if you saw among the maybe water quality improvement projects that there are, or monitoring projects that there are, if there are, I don't know if you could categorize river, this is not technical, I'm not probably saying this right, but the rivers that are doing better, or the river management groups or areas or types of rivers that are doing better, either being more proactive or setting up better systems or improving more significantly. You know, if it's part of the country, or maybe the partnership rivers are doing better than the non-partnership rivers. Any trends that someone could see to look to for good models or leadership, besides looking at specific case studies, which are probably the best places to look.
No, it's a great question, Risa. Yeah, so the 2018 paper does look at that a little bit, but you know, there's so many different variables. So yeah, I think it's hard to pull out, at least with the level of review or evaluation that we did. It's really hard to pull out key points about that. So for example, I do think partnership rivers, you know, close to my heart, actually. But yeah, one of the things about them is there's often very engaged local communities. And so they often do have pretty good water quality. Maybe they're not doing all of the sampling or monitoring that's going on, but partnership rivers have strong partnerships, right? So that's always really impressive, the kinds of work that they do. But on the other hand, they're often in areas that are more urban or have more development. So yeah, so there's these different things that need to be considered when you're kind of making those kinds of, or trying to answer those kinds of questions. But yeah, partnership rivers, I think there's some really great examples of the kinds of partnerships that can be developed and can be used to address water quality issues. Certainly, those are some great examples. So.
And then I see, Bud, it looks like you might want to share something. You're welcome to come off mute.
Hi, excellent presentation, and I'm glad things are heading in this direction. I ask about the forensic testing because it's done in several states. For example, California, the water board requires farmers to test for contaminants in rivers. And when I lived in California, I was one that did that. And there's regular monitoring will tell you whether there is contaminants in the water, but often forensic testing requires you to track down something. For example, if your ORV is fish and you see a fish kill, you want to find out what the contaminant is, which means you go to a lab. When you find out what the contaminant is, you want to go upstream and find out the source. For example, it could be a point source that you know, outfall that dumped it. And I just wondered if there was you had any kind of plan and guidance for setting up a forensic monitoring like that.
Thanks very much for that question. Yeah, so again, this particular paper, you know, again, is really trying to be a little bit more broad than what you're talking about. Certainly, if there were an issue with a fish kill, or you know, I know on some rivers we've seen issues with mussels and you know, mussel die-offs and that kind of thing. So certainly there are places where a river manager probably should have that kind of monitoring included in their monitoring program if that's an issue that they're seeing. So really what this paper is just trying to do is, is to say, look at the threats that you're facing, look at the challenges that you're facing, and have your monitoring targeted at those particular kinds of threats or issues that you might be seeing. But we really didn't go into the detail like you're describing, which is certainly what we would hope would happen on a particular river that was having issues. But this paper really didn't go into that kind of detail, I guess. Roy or Mike, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Well, no, just generally, I mean, those forensic type studies are so site specific, right? Of what needs to be done and what should be looked at. I'm a big believer in at least, approaching the state initially for an idea, and maybe they know of other issues associated with that stretch of stream, and they might have data from historic data that would maybe shed light on what has happened. Yeah, so I guess that would be my first recommendation, but it's real hard to provide any type of real detailed information or plan, right? When the circumstances may differ considerably, even from neighboring drainages.
Thanks, Bud and Jennifer and Mike. And I did see a question in the chat, and I think this is more just to everyone here about, are there folks here that are looking for help in starting a monitoring program? And also, are there experienced folks out there who can help? So great question, Liz. And, I see Shane put a comment in the chat if you haven't seen it, talking about how their partnership on the Scenic River and have a monitoring plan that they need to constantly update as they kind of tweak things and add sites, and how it's a work in progress. And so if you want to say more about that, Shane, you're happy to come off mute, or if anyone else has any, if anyone else is looking to start a monitoring program, or if other people have some experiences that they'd like to share.
I have a question that's not really related to that, but if it's going to be quiet, and this is, Jen, maybe you like this question because it's another partnership question, but the an interstate, I forget it was called the interstate basin or tri-state watershed basin management entity was created when the lower Delaware was designated. So it was, the water quality was so terrible, and it was so complicated to manage it because it's New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, that this interstate commission was created, and they have done a fabulous job over the course of many years. I wonder, are there any other systems like that that are developed, like a system was developed for water quality improvement specifically? Because I'm not sure I know of any others, because it's pretty remarkable that it had to be created, remarkable that they've done such a great job.
Risa, I'm not aware of any other examples like that, but I'm also afraid that I don't see Jen on the call any longer. Did we lose her?
Oh, maybe we lost her.
I'm
Yes.
here.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sorry, I did get dropped for a minute, but I'm here. Yeah, no, I think that happens at various scales, Risa, is what I was gonna say. You're talking about a pretty large, large region, so 3 different states are involved, and that does happen, actually, surprisingly, maybe. the Chesapeake Bay has, you know, a lot of coordination and different kinds of activities that are going on. So some of those big rivers and big water bodies like that certainly have these different water quality improvement programs going on. And if a river, any kind of river manager is part of that watershed or part of that region that network covers, you know, to plug into that it would be the ideal thing. But again, each river needs to understand what the particular challenges are for them, and try to develop different kinds of ways of dealing with the water quality challenges that they might be facing, and it's going to be different no matter where you are. But yeah, I think that does happen. Reset. It happens at, you know, very local levels where maybe a couple of towns get together and are working on water quality improvement, or it may be a combination of state and local group that are getting together to improve water quality. So yeah, I think we are seeing those kinds of things. If we dig a little, we can find them throughout the country. So yeah.
Yeah, Reese, I guess the comment that I'll add is, in my experience, a very high number of watershed organizations, watershed coalitions work on water quality issues, and it just depends on how large of a watershed that group chooses in which to organize itself. I've definitely seen watershed groups that cover, you know, multiple counties and multiple municipalities, but at the scale of interstate is not, like you mentioned, is I think is a little bit more unusual.
And I think it's important to have kind of the end goal in mind as you're developing a plan. You know, so if you are hoping to, if it's a water quality limited stream and you're hoping to get it delisted off of it, you know, working with the state to understand what their criteria are for specific water quality monitoring. So because I saw the note in the chat about volunteer monitoring. I think I'm a big believer in that type of water quality monitoring or bio monitoring going out there. But also you need to be aware that if that data is going to be used for anything, it really needs to be of a quality that's defensible. So just be aware and again, work with the state to see what their criteria are. Make sure you're using equipment that meets those criteria so that data can actually be put toward its intended use.
Thanks, Mike. I think since we're kind of getting to the bottom of the hour, wanted to thank all these awesome panelists and for their great work, which has taken years. So kudos to all of you. So thank you so much for being here. And we have just a little bit of follow-up stuff for us. We'll be posting this recording of today's work on our YouTube channel. If you follow us, you'll see what's coming up. And then a couple of things that we have coming up in the next little bit. Next month, we're going to be talking about how, in the next month's roundtable, about how we as a community are dealing with extreme events, a huge one of which happened at the end of September in Tennessee and North Carolina. And I think there are lessons that we are learning about how, not besides how horrible that was, but what folks are doing in a really great way. 2 weeks from now, a short course on fluvial geomorphology. That'll be a 3-day plus potential field trip. Virtual field trip. And then we have trips coming up and are held by our chapters. A really cool one on the Buffalo River in March. So if you are a member, you'll see notices for that. If you are not a member, you can go to our website and find out about all this stuff. And then I think maybe Angie will I can just see the big screen. Angie will put together a link to a survey so that we can hear from you how you thought we did today and how much we can learn for participating and in future roundtables. And we appreciate all the feedback. Appreciate I'm going to stop sharing now. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate your questions. And again, thank you to our panelists for being experts and for sharing with us today. It's great to see you.
Yeah.
Anything else have I missed, Angie?
No, that's great. Thanks again to our panelists and for everyone joining today.
Yep. Well, thanks to RMS for hosting us. It's a great way to communicate products that we're developing that can help river managers and the public. So thanks for hosting us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Everybody.
All right, have a great rest of your day.
Hey.
Thank you.